Hey, in this video, I am going to show you how JQ works. You've maybe used it before. It's just a command line program for dealing with JSON files. And usually people just use it to pretty print a JSON document, but it can do so much more. And if you kind of learn the basics of it, then you'll be set. Like time spent learning the basics of JQ will pay off very quickly. Okay, here we are, right? The first thing to know about JQ, this is just my VS Code, by the way, is what everybody knows, right? If I have this, it's just a simple little JSON document, and I pass it to JQ with the dot like that, it formats it, it does a little pretty printing. Same thing happens if you don't even add the dot. But this is just the beginning, right? The way that I tend to use JQ is, right, I have some sort of REST API that returns some data, and I need to play around with it, figure out what's going on, right? And if I pass it the dot, it formats it nicely, big deal. This is, by the way, the JQ endpoints in GitHub. So yeah, if I pass it the dot, it formats it, which is nice, but that's just the beginning of the object indexing system. So you can do dot and then a field, right? So right here is my document. I can just pick any field in it and go into it. So that's topics, right? And now we're just returning that part of the document. I have some other examples here, right? Here's name. So now we get the name as JQ. Here's owner, right? And so you can see the owner has a whole bunch of information. And we can further move down from there, right? Here's owner.login, right? So this is the simplest thing to understand. The object identifier index, I guess they call it. Basically, JQ lets you treat a JSON document like it's a JavaScript object, which, I mean, it sort of is. And you can just, dot into it. Like you can do like dot key and then dot subkey and then dot subkey, right? It's just an object and you're just exploring the properties going into it. Easy enough. What you may say happens then if you have something that's an array, right? So this is JQ and we're looking at issues. This is the JQ GitHub project and we're looking at, the first page of 5 issues. And you can see here it returns an array, right? And so this works the same way, right? If I want to get the 4th item in that, right, I just dot into that array and then get the 4th item. And you can do a lot besides that, right? Like here I have the array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can get from the 2nd to the 4th element, counting from 0 to get 3, 4, right? I can also just do from 2 to the end. You can also do, I think, negative indexes to start from the other side. So that's negative starting from that side. You can do negative this way to start at the beginning. Bam, that's simple, right? It's just an array, right? You're just walking into that array just like it's something in JavaScript. And then you can combine this with your object index, right? So we do this, and right now, right, we're going into the 4th element and we're getting the title. Very simple. Yeah. What if we want to go across, like we want to get all the titles, right? Then we don't apply a number. We just say into the array. And this is sort of like I like to think of like functional programming terms as sort of like a map. Like you're saying, go into this array, get all of these properties and return those back, right? So here we go. These are all the titles. Another thing to note is there is this -r, right? So right now, when I'm returning all these values, they all have quotes wrapped around them, which makes sense because they're strings. But what if my process is different, right? What if I'm getting a bunch of IDs and then I want to pass the IDs, onto some further curl command? I need to unwrap them. And that's where the -r comes in handy, right? Without the -r, it's returning strings, and I add this and then it unwraps them. Yeah, so that's arrays, right? Arrays are simple. In JQ, you just use these brackets to get inside of an array, and you can provide certain offsets or ranges of offsets, and you can combine it with the object indexing, right? So we're going into a key, which contains an array, which has a subkey, which has another array where we're getting the 2nd element. Very simple. It does exactly what you would expect. So the next thing to learn after that, so we have object indexing, array indexing, is array constructors, right? So if I pass an empty string, to JQ, and then I tell JQ to return 1, 2, you can see it returns 1 and 2 on a separate line. That's kind of an interesting program to think about in a way. JQ is taking none of the input and just returning 2 elements, which it returns line by line. But that's not actually valid JSON, right? Like, to return a object like that, we actually need to wrap it in an array, right? And so this is an array constructor. Now this is valid JSON because we're just wrapping it in an array. That may not seem useful, but it is useful because earlier we grabbed the title, right? We grabbed all these titles, but this is not a JSON document. This is just a list of strings. But if we take that same query and we wrap it in the array constructor, and we execute that, right now, what we have makes a lot more sense. Now we have an array. So that's an array constructor. That's pretty simple. You just wrap things in an array just like you would expect. Here's some interesting examples, right? So here I have made an array, and in that array I have an object, right? 2 objects. They both have a property named A, and they have different values for it, right? So I go into that with my dot, right? And then I'm going to go into the array, which is this part, and then I'm going to get the A, right? And so I get that back, B and C. But that's not a valid JSON document. And usually with JQ, I'm just like transforming or extracting some JSON into some other JSON, right? So the way to fix that, obviously, is you just wrap it in an array. Usually you put a space there because it just looks nicer, like that, right? Now we're talking. Then we can also use the .r if we want, which actually does the same thing in this case. I'm not sure why I added that example there, to be honest. So once we have array constructors, the next thing to know is object constructors. So using the same repo, right, we're going to the JQ issues API, and we're getting back issues, and we're going to do this. So I want to go to the issues, right, and I want to get back just the title and the number of the issues, right? So there's an array of items, and for each one I want to get the title and the array. So it's easy, right? I go into the returned results, then I go into the array, then I get the title. Into the results, into the array, get the number. But when I look at what's returned, it's not really what I want. It's just a list. Yeah, so we can do this instead, right? So now we're wrapping in an array, still not what we want, right? We need to actually wrap them in objects. What we want is an array with objects in it. And then we want each to have a title and a number. It's easy to see it with maybe a smaller example, right? So this is my name, Adam Gordon Bell. If I select the 0th element and the second element, I can get my name without the middle name, right? But if I want to make a new object, I just do this, right? It's basically the JSON document structure. So I'm going to start with a paren. I'm going to say first name. Then I have my JQ selector. Then I'm going to do last name. And then I have the selector for the last name, right? So I'm making a new object using these selectors like this, right? And so now I get first name Adam, last name Bell. So it follows from this that we use the same thing to produce our example, right? So we want to get back an array of results. We want to put them in an object. And the object is going to have a field called title. And then we use the same title selector, where we go into the object, into the array, get the title. And then same for number. We go into the object, into the array, get the number, right? So we're taking this document apart, putting back a document that's much smaller, that has just the title and the ID. Actually, this looks like it is incorrect. Fix manual selection title, Interesting. We're going to get to how to fix this in a minute. Another way to do this is, you can see in this example, it's basically, we have our selector here, right? And then inside of it, we go into the array, into the title, and then here we go into the array, into the title twice, right? So one way we can simplify that is to extract it. So we have our array constructor, and then we're going to go into the array, and then we're going to use a pipe, which I'm going to explain later. And then from there, we'll get the title and the number. Let's try that. There we go. Now here's our 2 separate titles and our 2 separate issues. I'm gonna explain how the pipe works later on. The important thing to learn from this section though is that JQ object constructors just work like this, right? You start a paren, you give a key, you have a JQ filter, and then you give another key and you have a JQ filter. So that's how you can take a big document with lots of fields and pull out specific elements and put them together into something that's the shape that you want it, which is like one of the more common things that I do with JQ is just like reshaping things. And so here's a very simple example that we had before, right? We have title and then we do dot title. We have number and then we do dot number. So if I run this, I mean, it does exactly what you think it's going to do, right? And the great thing about that is I can change the labels, right? I can say, instead of title, I can say, what's my name again? Instead of number, I can say thing, and that works. Now we get new labels. But most of the time, you just want to use the same label that it has, right? In that case, there's a shorthand available. You can just give it the name. If you're using the name that exists, if you're like the selector name is equal to the label name, you can just omit it and do things like this. And that is how this example up here worked. So this is just a shortcut. You don't actually have to remember it, but if you're doing this title colon dot title, you can just simplify that. Okay, next up, sorting and counting. So if I run this, which is the JQ issues API, and I get title and number and labels, right? We're just going to get one item back, right? But what if we wanted to sort them, right? What if we had a whole bunch of them, we wanted to sort them? Well, JQ has a sort function. I can just call it like this. So here is an array I'm passing in and I call sort on it. And it's just going to sort those, based on the type that they are. If you give it an object to sort, like a whole bunch of, if you give it an array of objects, what it's going to do is pick the first element and those objects and sort based on those. And if there's a tie, go to the second one and so forth, right? Reverse is another function, right? So reverse, the output looks exactly like sort. So maybe I should have picked a better example, but it's just reversing the order that we have. So if we change this to ZZZ, what's the best way to make this make sense? We need reverse to work differently than sort. What if we put in duplicates, right? So then we do that. There, you can see it's not sorted. It's just reversed. So now the ZZZ is at the beginning. There's a whole bunch of JQ functions. Probably the thing you need, there's a function already for it. So length is just going to give you the length of an array. And then you can start chaining these things together. Coffee sip break. So I have a document, title is JQ select. So I want to get the title and then get the length of that. And so the way I'm doing that here, right, this whole time I've been piping my results to JQ, but here I'm using a second JQ. So this title will return one thing, the title, JQ select, and then I'll run length on it, which will just take the length, right? It's kind of a strange way to do this, but it totally works, right? We get the length is 9. Now there's a simpler way to do this, which is that, actually, can you even notice the difference between these two lines? It's the quotes, right? And the JQ, because here, what I'm doing is I'm running the pipe inside JQ. So JQ has its own pipe. It's different than the shell, like terminal pipe that I have down here. But conceptually, it works exactly the same. This selector will be run, and then its results sent to whatever the next selector or filter is. And so this means I don't have to run pipe JQ. I can combine things. And it gets better than that because I can combine things in interesting places within my JQ query. So using it all together, things can get a little bit more interesting, right? So I'm going to go to this issues API, right? Same as before. I'm going to get the title, I'm going to get the number, but for labels, I'm going to return the labels and then I'm going to sort them, right? So this selector here is using a pipe in the middle of it and using one of these functions. So let's run that, see what we get, right? So here's our issue, here's our labels. There only seems to be one label. When I tried this previously, there was more than one label. Examples going sideways. But rest assured, if there were multiple examples, it would be sorting them, right? And how would it be sorting them? Well, by this first key, right? And if they were exactly the same, then by the second key. Then we can do more from there, right? Like we can do, in our second example here, we're going to return the labels, but then we're going to sort by name. Sort by, we're passing into sort by labels, right? And then sort by can sort by a specific key. So now we're just using a different function to sort in a different way. The specific examples of like sort and sort by don't matter. I'm just trying to show you how you can combine the things that JQ offers to get some neat results, right? Oh, look at this. We got 2 labels. Woo-hoo. And we're sorting them by name. Fixed and master gets sorted to first right here. So now we've got back our results. We're sorting them by label. But yeah, that is how you use pipes and functions. And if you need a specific function, like you can just Google it. JQ has a bunch of them built in, and you can write your own, which I'm not going to get to today. And you probably will never need to do anyways. But here's another example, right? Now I am counting the number of labels using length, right? And now I can see that title, number, and labels by count is 2. So this is like a big step up. The first things we covered were pretty simple, right? An array, we can go into an array, we can go into an object, we can wrap things in an array, we can wrap things in an object. But now we're saying composition, right? We can combine things together with pipes, and we have functions, and we can chain things together. You can take a value and then use a pipe and then send it to a filter or do some other transformation on it. And you can do these things all in the various spots where you could select things. So that's pretty cool, right? We're getting close to bringing it all together, where you're going to be able to slice and dice various like REST A-points or, various JSON documents or files that you have kind of ad hoc by just chaining these things together. We're getting close to having the full picture, and then you can compose things as you need. But first I want to tell you about Earthly. Earthly is a build tool. Nobody likes fighting with their CI or with their build, or you run some suite of tests and then something occasionally fails because it's flaky. It's just not fun. Or like you have some problem in CI and so you push it and then wait for it to run and then it fails and you need to make a change and push it again. It's horrible. Earthly is like Docker, but for builds, for CI. It lets you run the same build exactly in CI on your local machine, on your friend's machine, on your coworker's machine. It seems like that shouldn't be a big deal, but it makes a huge difference in productivity once you're dealing with, like a team, once you have a couple different tools and a little bit of variety. This can really lock that down and remove that problem. And also it's fast because it uses some of the same caching stuff that Docker does, layer-based caching, which means a lot of times it can build your build faster than you built it before. And you can do it locally or on some beefy machine in the sky. Yeah, so that's Earthly. Check out Earthly. I work for Earthly and it's awesome. Okay, last thing to cover before we bring this all together is maps and selects. We're gonna make some more complicated things here. So similar query as before, right? I have the issues, I'm getting 100 of them. I'm gonna get the title, the number, the labels count, right? And I'm gonna pipe that into length. Then I'm gonna get the title count, which I'm getting by getting the title and piping that to length. Right? And you may notice that there is a little bit of duplication here, right? First, everywhere I've been using the array constructor, I'm mapping into the array and then doing all this stuff, and then I'm wrapping it back in the array. So map is actually just a way to do that. It's basically exactly equivalent to this, right? So I just take that out and I put in map, and now map just says, okay, go into the array, apply this stuff, and then rewrap in an array. That lets me clean things up a little bit. The next thing that's super cool is select. Select is how I filter. Select takes a predicate, right? Basically something that evaluates to true or false. So I'm putting together here, I made title length, right? Which is just title piped into length. And now I'm saying I only want to select the elements where title length is greater than 30. Right? And the way I'm running that is I'm mapping into my list again. I'm piping this whole thing. So once I get my results from up here, then I'm mapping into that and returning it. Right? So now I'm kind of doing like a query. I guess I was always doing query. I'm doing like kind of a SQL-y query, like checking for certain values and only returning them. Right? So now I'm only returning things that have a title longer than 50 characters or 30 characters, right? And I can just keep going from there. So like map lets me go into things, selects, lets me filter. And at this point, you basically have all the knowledge you need to combine all these various elements. There's map, there's select, there's pipes. You can start putting things together, right? So GitHub has a great API. You can do all kinds of queries and stuff, but I don't know how it works, and I don't remember all the syntax, but I don't have to know, because if I want to find some very particular thing about issues, like I can just turn the paging up real high to get back like 5,000 rows and then do this filtering client side, right? So here, what I'm doing is, right, I'm same as before, I'm getting back the title, the number, I'm building a URL of the issue that I want based on the number. I'm getting the title length, and then I'm sorting by title length because I'm saying, oh, what about getting all the issues with the longest titles? I just have this weird idea that if you put together an issue and the title is like fix this or like broken, it's not a good issue, right? But if it's like a very descriptive title and it's like, oh, found issue in version 3.5 but not 3.2, see details within, more likely to be good, right? So I don't know how to query that using the API or the UI, but I can do it right here in JQ. So I'm going to sort by title length. Title length sorts it with lowest numbers first. So to get that back, I'm going to reverse it, and then let's just get the top two. So this is just like a random exploratory query I made up, right? And now we get the two longest issues back. Tidy up, no mem, hand invitations if it, blah, blah, blah. Title, yeah, and this one can't use search bar and documentation because it's too low. I feel like this is contrary to my theory, right? Like this issue that the poor JQ guy has to deal with is just a complaint about the JQ documentation. I mean, docs are important, but it feels like this isn't the most important issue ever. And yeah, if I want to, like, this is the nice thing. When you understand just some of these components, you can just mess around with this, right? Like, what if we look the other way? So we're going to get rid of the reverse. Now we're looking at the two smallest, and look at this. I assume that this is not a good issue. Let's look. Good day. Yeah, exactly. This is totally what I was thinking of. His ticket starts with good day, and then it's, can somebody tell me how to build this project? That's awesome. But yeah, once you master these things, small amount of pieces with JQ, then it's easy to explore just JSON documents like this, right? So let's just review. Let's bring it all together. This is the most important thing, by the way. This is, next time you need to do something with a JSON document, you could go to ChatGPT and just ask it how to do it. But if you understand these 3 lines, I think that next time you have a problem, you'll just be able to think it through, maybe glance back at these 3 lines, maybe print them out or bookmark this or whatever. And then you'll have the skill to solve the problem yourself. So first thing, right, is just how to get into the elements that you want, right? So for objects, you can just do like dot key. For arrays, you can do, element 0, then subkey. You can grab ranges of the array, and you can just keep going, right? That's how you select in. To get elements out into the shape that you want, if you want something in an array, wrap it in object, wrap it in array constructor. You want something in an object, you wrap it in parens, which is the object constructor. And then you just build it up, right? Key 1, and then my selector 1, key 2, my selector 2, where these can be anything from up here. That gets you a lot of the way. And then the last thing is just, there's all these built-in functions, and there's ways to pipe and combine things, right? So if I want to count all the sub-elements of something, right, there is like length for counting an array, right? If I want to turn a number into a string because I want to concatenate it, there's toString. And then, I can just give it my own labels, and I can use map to more concisely get into arrays. And I can use select, like up here, to filter out elements that don't meet certain parameters, right? So that's it. These 3 lines are sort of the whole thing. I mean, you can go way further with JQ. You can write your own functions. It's sort of a full programming language, a functional programming language. It's kind of neat, but you don't need that. This is what you need. These 3 lines. I hope that was useful. If you have more questions about JQ, just hit me up. I'll keep making these. I'm trying to make a video a week. We'll see if I can keep that up. Hopefully this was useful, right? Yeah, so that's the video, right? If you want to learn more, about building software, subscribe to the channel. If you want to build software in a better way, check out Earthly. You know, for a little tiny project, if you're just using JQ and some shell scripts, maybe it doesn't matter. But once you get beyond that, you know, like having a solid way to build things, that's no nonsense, really can make a big difference. And let me know your JQ questions in the comments. I'll leave them below. And yeah, it might inspire another video. Anyways, until next time, thank you for watching my videos.